All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Kabbalah Café. And I'm so excited to be here with you. You know, the world is talking about one thing, but we're going to talk about something else. The world may be talking about the Super Bowl or the Olympics or whatever it is, but we're going to talk about the internal battles that exist within each and every one of us, which to me is more important than one guy bashing another guy to see who can get a ball in the end zone. I'm kidding. We're all fans, football fans at some point. But nonetheless, Kabbalah is real life, not football. So let's talk about fire and water. Today's topic is fire and water. And I want to begin, we're going to explore this on a lot of different levels, all mystically. We'll speak about this on a cosmic level, on a material level, meaning a physical world level, as well, meaning a scientific level, as well as on a human level, internal level, and spiritual level within each and every one of us, and hopefully walk away with some powerful inspiration and application. So let's begin. I want to begin with the end of the first chapter of Tanya. Now, Tanya, as you may know, is the Bible of Chabad Hasidic philosophy. It's like the book that encapsulates and captures the very spiritual modality of what Chabad Hasidism and mysticism is all about. And so at the end of the first chapter, I'm just going to hone in on one detail. So he talks about, he's developing the author Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, is talking about and developing the notion of the idea that we have two souls within every one of us. Because we each possess two souls. There's a godly soul and there's an animal soul. There's a higher self, there's a lower self. There's the part of us that wants to exist and a part of us that would rather not exist in a positive way, but rather be subsumed within source, not self. There's the part of us that wants to assert our own ego, our own space, take up more space, defend our space, and part of us that says, space? Who needs space? Like the joke with the Jewish mother, right? How many Jewish mothers does it take to change a light bulb? 0. I'll sit in the dark, it's fine. I'm kidding. I don't mean that. That's not necessarily positive. But what I mean is the godly soul is not about asserting self and defending self, but rather about being of service. Not self, but selfless. And so in describing the animal soul, which is the first soul that you and I come in contact with, and the very proof is, you ever meet a baby? Yeah. Right. I mean like a child baby. I don't mean like, right? Yeah, like a child baby. It's the first thing the child does when they're born. Very first thing. Cries.
I did
right.
For some reason.
You did not cry? Well, you are the exception to the rule. But there the child is, and I've used this example many times before, 2 a.m., and the child is crying and waking up the mom, maybe the dad. So this weekend, parenthetically, is the Kinus HaShlucha. It's the Chabad Rebbetzin convention in New York. And so there's like 4,500 Chabad women, Chabad Rebbetzins from around the world gathered for this convention, for this conference. And I will also mention, parenthetically, that it's the worst weather of the year up in New York. It's crazy. But be that as it may. So I remember when our kids were younger and my wife would go for the weekend, we would speak, before Shabbat and then after Shabbat. So we would speak Saturday night and she would say, how are the kids? How did it go? I'd say, it was great. How did they sleep Friday night? Great. The kids slept through the night. And she would always tell me, no, you slept through the night. The kids definitely got up. You slept through the night. Anyway, so back to the story. So babies wake up and they cry and they wake up their parents. And why do they wake up? And why do they cry? Let's say they're hungry. They're hungry. So they cry. Who heard of crying when you're hungry? You're hungry, either get something to eat or wait a few minutes. Who's crying? A baby never had a thought, and this is not we're not criticizing babies, obviously not, but I'm just pointing out something. A baby never had a thought that crossed their mind to say, oh, let me wait a few hours. My mom is very tired. It's been a rough day. I'm hungry, but I'll survive. Let me wait a few hours. Obviously, again, not a criticism, not a critique. This is just part. But it's highlighting the simple fact that what is a child, what is a human being's first consciousness? Which soul are they aware of first upon birth? It's the animal soul. It's the I need soul. Again, it's not a criticism, it's a reality. And that's why in Tanya, as he's describing the two souls, the first one that he articulates in chapter 1 of the book is the animal soul. It's only chapter 2 that he says, and there's a second soul. And there's a reason why 1 is first and 2 is second. Because the animal soul always is the human being's first consciousness, first awareness. And dare I say, even as we're adults, it's very often our first reaction. Our first reaction to being hungry is, I would love to throw a fit. But I am in company, therefore, all right, maybe I don't need to eat right this second. Right? So it takes almost a second to like kick in a higher self that's less about self. So typically, intuitively, we are more in touch with our animal self, and then we have to get in touch and remind ourselves that we have a higher self. That's by way of kind of introduction. So at the end of the first chapter, very interestingly, he talks about, he describes the animal soul by breaking it down into the 4 elements. Now, this was something big back in the day. Scientists and philosophers in the ancient world spoke extensively about the 4 elements of all existence. Fire, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afar. Fire, wind, water, and earth. I believe there was a band that took 3 out of 4 of those. Right? What was the band called?
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Earth, Wind, and Fire. What did they miss? Earth, wind, fire, water. They missed water. Maybe they drank water while on stage, and they were they had that 4th element. So these are the 4 elements, and there have been efforts and people that are more proficient in these in the sciences have sought to kind of map the 4 elements of the ancient world onto the the various elements of what science speaks about as far as the foundational elements of all existence, right? The periodic table. Yeah. How many elements are there on the periodic table?
120, something like that.
Okay, a lot more than 4. But if you reduce everything to their core properties, you can maybe reduce it to 4. Either way, I want to speak about what the Alter Rebbe says at the end of chapter 1 of Tanya, mapping the 4 elements onto the animal soul. And he says like this: fire, and this is the animal soul, not the godly soul. Fire is the propensity that we have toward anger. Right? People get angry. People blow up. They turn red. It's fire. It's passion. Could be good passion, but sometimes it's not good passion. Right? Anger. Eish. Ruach. What is wind? What is wind for the animal soul? So wind is empty. Right? It's non-substantive. So it's the part of us, or it's the propensity that we have to speak things that are not important, or to be boastful. There's even an expression in English where you say that person was full of hot air, right? What does that mean, full of hot air? It could either mean a little bit of arrogance, or it could mean that whatever they said doesn't mean anything. That's the same idea. It's like emptiness, empty words, empty praise, self-praise, whatever. And then you have water. The way he describes water is that water is the idea of pleasure seeking, the pursuit of pleasure, physical pleasure. He likens it to water. So fire, we understand, I think. Air, again, empty, right? Water, what's with water? So he says, because all delights, all pleasurable things grow from water. I'm assuming he's referring to food, right? It all requires water. But it's interesting also because if you think about it, hey, good morning, welcome. It's interesting also when you think about it because you also have this idea that if you've ever seen a commercial about food, there's always water on the food item. You ever see that? You ever notice that? If they're showing like a tomato, there's always droplets of water on the tomato, or they're cutting it and it's spritzing water. You know what I'm talking about? There's always like, for some reason, it's the water, it's the moisture that evokes this notion of it being not just good, but really good. like really delicious. Like we even use it in the context of appetite. We call it mouth watering, right? What's mouth watering? It gets the juices flowing. There's something about that. There's something about the water that represents and evokes and whatever, the idea of pleasure and excitement, physical, material pleasure. Let's keep on going. The last one is earth. And what does the earth represent within the animal soul? Laziness. It represents sluggishness. Sluggishness. All right. I was thinking about adding another isness there, but no, we'll keep it at that. It's the idea of being sluggish. It's about sadness. It's heaviness, right? It's about like an emotional state of heaviness. So all of these are traits and characteristics in which the animal soul can manifest. The animal soul can manifest itself in a way of, anger and just hostility, and that's the fire. It can manifest itself in emptiness and frivolity and boastfulness, which is air. It can manifest itself in pleasure seeking, which is water, and it can manifest itself in laziness, sluggishness, and sadness, which is earth. Make sense? Why am I saying all this? Good question. I want to hone in today on fire and water, two of those elements. And I want to trace the fire and water, which are not just, okay, let's pause for a quick second. Something I've, again, shared many times. Kabbalah speaks of the basic law of spiritual gravity. And the basic law of spiritual gravity, much like the law of physical gravity, is that everything that's up will come down. Well, not everything, but if it's down, it probably came from above. Gravity pulls things down. The same is true with the spiritual law of gravity, or the law of spiritual gravity, and that is that everything that exists here has a spiritual source above. And when we say above, just by way of clarification, I don't mean physically that the higher dimensions are physically above. If you went in a rocket ship up, you would land on the spiritual realms. It's not physically up, but conceptually and spiritually, it's a higher dimension. It might be right here, but it's a deeper, higher dimension. So let's talk about what that means. There's physical fire, but then there is the spiritual source of fire. And they're always going to be compatible because one is evolving, or in this case, devolving from the other. First comes the spiritual source, and then comes the physical manifestation. The way that the Talmud, which is not a Kabbalistic work on the surface, the way the Talmud, the great repository, the great book of Jewish law and ethics, describes this, is by saying that there is no blade of grass below that does not have a mazel, does not have some sort of angel star or whatever, that hits it and says grow. Can you imagine? Little angel going giddy up to the blade of grass? As your grass is kind of hibernating in the winter right now. It's kind of like laying low, right? The lawn people are still coming and you're like, why? What is happening here? What are you doing? But even as that's going on, there's always an energy that makes things grow. There's always, everything is evolving, or again, devolving, coming down from a higher source. So let's talk about fire. And fire is the most ethereal of all elements. Fire is the most mysterious, both in its origin, in its existence, and the way it ceases to exist. Fire is unique on every level. Let's talk about how it exists, how it comes to be. Most things are, and whatever, it's not a mystery as to how things are. But fire is very mysterious in how it's created. How is fire created? You have to create force in order to produce fire. It's almost like what the message is. Fire doesn't want to be here, and you have to force it into being. Fire never wanted to be here. Fire didn't ask to be here. And it's only through great struggle, great effort that you produce fire, that you force fire, coerce it, strike it into existence. You have to literally slam two things together to create friction, to create a spark, to then expand into some sort of flame and fire. Fire didn't want to be here. Even while it's here, it doesn't want to be here. And the greatest proof, as again I've mentioned many times before, is that fire, what it does while it's here is it destroys things. Which means at the core, it's trying to destroy itself. It doesn't want to be here. Meaning what it wants to do is undo its being. It didn't ask to be here. And then when it's here, it says, I would rather not be here, but you're holding me down with something. Fuel, let's say oil in a wick. Say straight up simple lamp situation. You have the actual vessel of the lamp. You have some oil, you have a wick, and you have a flame. The flame didn't ask to be here. You forced it into existence. You struck it. Now there's fire. The fire says, I don't want to be here. I didn't ask to be here. I still don't want to be here. So how do I get out? How do I get out of here? So the oil says, as long as I'm here, you can't leave. So it says, okay, what if I get rid of you? Okay. What if I get rid of you, the oil, and you, the wick? Yeah? Can I go? Yes. Fire is destructive at its core because it's really self-destructive. The fire doesn't want to be here. The fire has one ideation. That fire has one idea. It wants to return to its source above, the spiritual source of fire. It's the only existence that bespeaks non-existence or anti-existence. It's the only, using the language of Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's the only yesh, it's the only reality that would rather be an ayin, that would rather be a nothing. It's the only something that would rather be a nothing. See, all of reality is created something from nothing, from a higher realm of nothingness of what we know. Fire is, but everything else, once it's created, says, I'm here. How do I take up more space? How do I assert my own existence even more? Fire says, I didn't ask to be here. I don't want to be here. How do I get out of here? And so we think of fire as destructive, but really it's not destructive of other things. It's only trying to get rid of the things that are holding it down so that it can go out. Because at the end of the day, fire will always put itself out. Because once it finishes consuming everything that you have applied to it or that the wind has blown it into or whatever, once it consumes all of that, you know what happens? It's out, which is what it always wanted. It's the only entity on earth that has an existential friction, right? It, at its core, in its lifeblood, is this friction of, I don't want to be here. The contrast of this is water. Water is very happy to be here. Just look at the properties of water. What does water do? It spreads out, right? You have a bowl, large bowl. You pour water. What happens when you pour the water? What does it do? It spreads out. It takes up more space. Water never stays in one place. Ask anyone who ever had a crack in their swimming pool. Yeah, water's gonna be content where it is. I don't need to go through that hole. I'm cool. Imagine we took this cup, we poked a hole in the bottom, and imagine the water said, yeah, I'm okay. I'm not gonna go. Water would ever say that? No, water's always going down to the next lower place. I said before that Tanya says that water is associated with pleasure. Pleasure is the same way. Pleasure is never content staying where it is. Once we're fixated on pleasure, it's always the next lower thing. That's the nature of pleasure, is the nature of water. That's the nature of pleasure, which is the nature of water, which is to always go down. Water seeks to assert its identity or its isness, it being an is. Fire wants to assert its non-isness, its source. It always comes down to this duality, self or source. We can frame it as pleasure versus purpose. It doesn't really make a difference. It's always about this duality. Lower self, higher self, self or selfless, pleasure versus purpose. It's the same friction. We have the same friction. So fire is emblematic of our soul. King Solomon writes, King David or King Solomon who writes this? One of them. One of the father-son combo writes, Ner Hashem nishmat adam. The flame of God is the soul of man. The human soul is God's flame. Why is it called a flame? Why is it called a flame? Of all of the examples, why don't we say it's God's, anything. Is it flame? Because the soul, the godly soul, this is the godly soul. The godly soul is like a flame. Didn't want to be here. It's kind of forced into existence, meaning in the material world. And all it does is really want to reconnect with its source. Now, at the very same time, the soul also has a sense that it has a purpose here below, and therefore it kind of at some point leans into its purpose and is not, necessarily trying to escape. But at the core of it, the core nature of fire is to wish to unravel its own existence and undo itself. which is very unique in all of creation. All of the natural world, there is no thing that by its core and by its nature and by its actions actively is seeking to unravel its very identity. And by the way, when you apply fire to something else, as I just said before, right, what does it do? It reduces it to ashes. Meaning it takes something that is a thing and splits it apart and deconstructs it. What does water do? It's the opposite. Water constructs things. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you ever take flour, a bunch of little particles, you pour some water in there, what happens? It makes it into one. Water takes many and makes it into one, and fire takes one and makes it into many. Fire unravels, water ravels. No, it's not a word, right? What is unravel? Binds. But how could there be an unravel without a ravel? We need to speak to some language experts on that. Fire unravels and water binds. Right? You mix water into something when you want to bring it together. Water makes it cohesive. It makes it more substantive. Fire makes something less substantive. It's the nature of these two dynamics. Let's keep on going. So within the human experience, aside from what we learned before from the book of Tanya, chapter 1, there is this idea that fire represents ascension and water represents descent, which is something that we've been talking about, right? What does fire want to do? Return to its source. And that's why when you light a candle, the flame always points up. Take your candle and turn it sideways. Guess what? No. It's the only thing that exists that's anti-gravity. It's unbelievable. Fire is the most remarkable thing that we have on earth. It's the only thing, the only physical substance that we have that speaks to a higher truth. It's almost like a spiritual entity on earth. It's the hardest to produce. As water produced, to force it into existence. Literally. Do you know why we light, in the Havdalah, why we light a candle? We say a blessing. You know, Saturday night, as we close out Shabbat, we recite the Havdalah prayer. Havdalah means separation, separating between the holiness of Shabbat and the mundanity of the rest of the week. And so we use three items. A glass of wine. We have besamim, we have sweet-smelling spices, and then we have a candle. Why do we have a candle? I mean, you could ask about the other two also, but I'm asking focus on the candle. Why the candle? Many different answers are given. But one of them, which gets to the history, one of them which gets to the history of the human experience says the following. You know, Adam and Eve were created on a Friday. And they sinned on the Friday. And because of the sin, God was going to make the world a little darker and introduce like real darkness to the world. But Shabbat was coming. So God said, I'll hold off on this darkness until after Shabbat. So came Saturday night, after the first Shabbat, the first day of rest, and it got dark. And Adam got very scared. So God said, all right, I'm going to teach you how to create fire. And God teaches Adam how to create fire. It's a creation. It's a divine skill to be able to create fire. Fire is a physical reality that is at its core wholly spiritual. Which other thing do you drop and it goes up? Nothing else. Nothing else. You take anything, it'll fall down. A flame is the only thing. You turn it sideways, it's still going up. Who does that? How could it still be going up? Makes no sense. Fire is ascension. In the language of Kabbalah and Chassidus, melmata lamayla, from below to above. Fire ascends. Fire goes up. And what about water? I already spoke about water before. Water will always go down. No matter what. Water never flows up. You know, it's funny. I was teaching a class a few weeks ago, a Wednesday class, JLI class, on the Nile River. And the Nile River is one of those rivers that flows from south to north. It's like, oh my gosh, south to north. South and north. It's not like the globe is like, it's not like it works like that. Because then all the people in the southern hemisphere, would be falling down. That's not how it works, right? The reason why the Nile flows from south to north is because of the elevation, the topography. Because where it comes from and where it goes, and it empties into the Mediterranean, where it comes from, where it goes, it's going down. Water will always flow downward. And so you could not find greater contrast than fire and water. And yeah, everyone knows fire and water are opposites because one will extinguish the other. Right? Either the water will put out the fire or the fire will evaporate the water. Either way, one is putting out the other. Right? It's a cage match and only one will win. Zero-sum game. Either the fire or the water will be left standing. You're not going to have both. The miracle of the hail in Egypt, remember the hail? Yeah. That was plague number 7. 7? 8, 9, 10? Yeah. I believe it was plague 7. Plague number 7 was the hail. The miracle of the plague of hail was that they had balls of ice that came down from heaven with fire inside. Nowadays, it's a decor item. It's like, oh, I have a globe light hanging down in my kitchen above the little island situation, right? It's cool. Globe. It's like, I'm kidding, right? But a plague. It smashed everything and then it burnt everything. The water and fire coexisting is supernatural. That doesn't make sense. That can't be. Because they represent two complete opposites, not just in their physical properties, on a simplistic level. Yeah, water puts out fire. Why? Because that's how it works. On a deeper level, they represent opposites, polar opposites. One goes up, one comes down. Completely different movements. Make sense so far? Mm-hmm. At the end of the Amidah, at the end of the Kaddish, the end of various prayers, we say a line that I would imagine everyone here is familiar with. In fact, it's even sometimes put to a song. Ohoseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, v'yal kol Yisrael, v'yimru, amen. Right? What does it mean? Oseh shalom bimromav, he who makes peace above, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, should make peace for us below. V'yal kol Yisrael, and all of Israel, v'yimru amen, and let us say amen. Meaning, just like God makes peace above, let God also foster peace below. First of all, I'm going to critique that a drop and say, if we want peace, I think we need to create the peace. You can't rely on it. God bring peace as I smash the other. I mean, that's not going to work either. But that aside, what does it mean that God makes peace above? Does that imply that there's conflict above? Because above would mean with the angels. So what does that actually mean? So Kabbalah says yes. You know why? Because there are spiritual ministers, meaning angels of fire and angels of water. And God makes peace between the Sar, Shal Eish, and the Sar, Shal Mayim. Between the minister of fire and the minister of water. God is making peace between them. What does that mean? There's a minister of fire, a minister of water, and they're fighting. Without going too deep into what that means and which angels those are emblematic of, here's what you need to know. Fire and water, no matter how you look at it or how you slice it, are inherent and intrinsic opposites. One is going up, one is coming down, and you're not going to change that reality. And they're polar opposites. And yeah, and we're saying just like God, somehow, it says in Kabbalah that, how you make peace. When each divine minister realizes that they're standing before the king, then they get along. Because in the face of the king, you got to behave. You can't start fooling around in front of the king. If we had a sense of purpose and mission, we might also be able to get along, as opposed to squabbling whatever it is, like human beings sometimes do. But getting back to fire and water, these two modalities represent two different movements and two different elements of divine service. And okay, before I get there, let me talk about this on the level of Sefirot. I want to give you the full picture of the fire-water duality. Within the realm of the Sefirot, and many of you are familiar with the 10 Sefirot, there's Chachma, Bina, and Dat, Chesed, Gvura, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. I want to focus on the two primary emotional Sefirot, Chesed and Gvura. What are Chesed and Gvura? Chesed is kindness. Gevura is discipline. Very good. Discipline and strength. You're basically a Kabbalist. I have a video on Kabbalah that has a lot of views. It's like around 1 million views. Yeah, it's the one that went viral. Anyway, but there's like a lot of comments on it. A lot of angry comments. Yeah. One of them wrote, "I see the devil in the rabbi's eyes." I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I don't even know. But yeah, legit. It's not on my channel, by the way. It's on AIB, Atlanta Interfaith Broadcasters. Anyway, but it's all good. But what was I going to say? Oh, there are some people that were like, "Is he saying capitalist?" So I'm always conscious of that. Kabbalist. You're a Kabbalist, not a capitalist. You might also be a capitalist, but Kabbalist. So Chesed is kindness, and Gevura is discipline, strength, severity. Which one would you apply to which? Fire and water. How would you align those two? Which one is fire associated with? Gevura. And which one is water associated with? Chesed. Or which one is Chesed associated with water? I forgot how I asked the question. But either way, Chesed is what? What is Chesed? Chesed is kindness. Chesed is expansion. It's flowing, right? It's generosity. It's giving. Water is flowing. Water is moving. And Gevura is kind of like strength, tension, fierceness. It's like fire. Okay, two more biblical examples. And then we're going to go into modalities of divine service. So, 1 second here, please. Okay, so let's talk about biblical stories. Okay, so 2 biblical stories that are relevant to our conversation. Story number 1. Story number 1 is the story of Yosef. Story number 2 is the story of the Paschal Lamb. Give me 1 second here, please. Okay, story number 1 is the story of Joseph. Story number 2 is the story of the Paschal Lamb. I want to begin with the Paschal Lamb for a second, because that's going to be the first one that we're going to cover. That's going to make sense in the order. Okay. So I was just checking in on my kids. One of them reached out to me to make sure everything's okay. Okay. Now, next. So the story of the Paschal Lamb. So God gives the instruction about the Paschal Lamb, which is the final meal that the Jews were to eat in Egypt before the Exodus. God said, this is the night before the Exodus. Right? So God says, prepare matzah, prepare a lamb, right? And you're going to eat it in a special way. You're going to eat it at home, and make sure to put blood on the doorpost of your homes, stay inside, eat it with your families. And then the next day was the Exodus. So the plague happened that night. The Jews were at home eating, and then the next day they got out. Great. So just to talk about the menu of the Paschal Lamb and how it was to be prepared. So God tells Moses to tell the people that the Paschal Lamb has to be roasted over the fire. Not cooked, not braised. I'm kidding. I'm like embellishing here. What's braised? I don't even know what braised is. Whatever, not cooked, not braised, not pan roasted. Not even roasted on fire with a pan. Nothing should separate between the fire and the actual lamb. It's going to be roasted over a fire. And the commentaries wonder. The commentators ask the question, and it's almost like a bit of an obvious question, which is, does God really care how I cook my lamb? Like, seriously. I'm eating the lamb. Like, get out of the kitchen. God, like, lay off the kitchen for a second. What's up with the, oh, you can only cook it this way? What does that even mean? So there's a beautiful insight into this. And that is that, what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be free? This was the night before the Exodus. And with this meal, God was instructing the Jewish people. He wasn't just providing them like a menu for, shall we say, the Last Supper in Egypt. But rather, God was providing them the recipe for what it means to be free. What it means for a human being to be free is to live a fire life. A life of, and I'm going to use the word discontent, but I don't mean it in a negative way. I don't mean that we're always kvetching and complaining about life. I don't mean discontent in a lower sense, but in a spiritual sense. Discontent, never satisfied with our accomplishments. Because what is fire, if not this restless burning and yearning for something higher, to ascend to the next level up? Fire is always seeking the next level up. Fire is always pointing upward and trending upward. And so the message before the Exodus is, you want to be free? To be free means to not be content with the last mountain that you climbed. Because the moment you're content with what you've accomplished, you stop moving and you stop growing. And then you cease to be free. Now you're a slave to the status quo. You're a slave to your ego, a slave to your accomplishments. Whereas if you're always pushing, always striving, always growing, always yearning, always burning, then you're free. It wasn't just a menu. It wasn't just a recipe. So I cooked Shabbos this week. My wife was out of town. So I followed some recipes. They all came out very good, I must say. God also provides recipes. My kids even told my wife, he might have made it. They only did that to make me feel good. But there's something about this recipe. Take the lamb, right? Prepare it, roast it over a fire. Follow the recipe. Not in a pan, not in a pot, not with water. No water. No water should be involved, because water represents, I'm content. You know what water is? Water is, the joke about the guy who's watching the big game on TV? And he says, and he's watching one of these pharmaceutical medical commercials. And he says to his wife, look, if I ever, get into a vegetative state, pull the plug. She goes over to the TV and pulls the plug. So, look, that's the joke, right? So water is like that just, when you sink into your chair, you just melt into, like water. Has anyone ever slept on a water bed? Yeah? Not with keys in your pocket, right? It's always a bad idea. Not with your Swiss Army knife. I love Swiss Army knives. I spoke about it recently in one of the classes, right? It had that, it always has those, the good, Swiss Army knives?
Yeah.
Little scissors. That was my favorite, little scissors. But it always had that toothpick, the plastic toothpick, that was way too big to fit into your teeth. You're like, who's got that much space that would even work? It's a very
Swiss people.
Apparently, I don't know. It's all the chocolate. I don't know what it is. But getting back to the story, you guys are dentists. It's a very large toothpick.
What's this if you have space between your front teeth?
I mean, I have a little bit, but even that, there's nothing. I mean, what do you feel like knocking something in? Anyway, after the class, you could tell me the insights into the. I mean, floss is thin. It's got to be thin. What is this? Back to the story. Water. Water is relaxation. Water is contentment. The message before the Exodus is contentment is the antithesis, dare I say, the kryptonite of freedom. You want to be free? Don't be content. Oh my gosh, God is so demanding. Yeah, God is demanding. God wants us to live and to grow and to strive. And then we have the story about water. Joseph is thrown into a pit by his brothers. I mean, with family like this, can you imagine? Talk about an awkward Thanksgiving after the reunion. Anyway, he's thrown into a pit. And the Torah says the following. This is before they sold him. They were planning on killing him or letting him die in the pit, alone. Vahabar reik, and the pit was empty. Ein bo mayim. There was no water inside. And all of the commentaries ask the same question. And what's the question? Redundancy. It says the pit was empty, there was no water. Why not just say it was empty? That means there was no water, right? Mm-hmm. If it's empty, that means there's no water and there's no sand. Well, maybe there's earth. But why do you need to say it was empty and there was no water? Who's talking about water? And you already said it was empty. So Rashi, the primary biblical commentary, points out the Torah is telling us that it wasn't actually empty. It was only empty of water, but it had snakes and scorpions, meaning he was going to die in there. There was poisonous snakes and scorpions inside. So when it says that the pit was empty, it then clarifies, says it was empty, it had no water, but there were dangerous, creatures in there. Just to highlight how horrible it was what they did to him before they pulled him out and then trafficked him, did human trafficking. Okay. The mystics pick up on this and they say it's a lesson in life. Water, this is going to take us to our next level of understanding. Water, as we've said today, symbolizes that which comes down from above to below, always flowing downward. And we've talked about this in primarily not such a positive sense. We talked about how this refers to hedonistic pleasures. We talked about how this refers to contentment and to asserting ego and self as opposed to higher purpose. So we haven't always painted today water in the most flattering light spiritually. So that shifts right now in a dramatic way. Because in addition to everything we've said so far about water, there's one more point that the mystics say about water. That water symbolizes Torah. Why does water symbolize Torah? Because just like water always flows down, so too Torah was given from above, divine wisdom, into our physical reality. God takes his wisdom, which is unfathomable. How could we ever, claim to understand or to make sense of, be able to make sense of divine wisdom? God takes his wisdom and lowers it to a space where you and I can wrap our heads around it. That is one of the greatest magic tricks of all time. God taking his wisdom and making it accessible to us is a tremendous descent, symbolized by water. And so what in the story of Joseph, when it talks about the pit, it's really a reminder for each of us in our own lives. Forget Joseph right now. Forget the brothers right now. Forget what they did right now. Let's talk about the pit and the water and the snakes and scorpions. Because this is a message in life. If the pit, that would be the head, is empty of water, of Torah, you know what's going to be inside? Snakes and scorpions. If your mind is not filled with positivity, it's going to be filled with negativity. If you don't actively and consciously imprint positivity on your mind, think about things that are uplifting and meaningful and resonant in a spiritual level, you know what's going to happen? Your mind is going to be filled with shtuyot. Not only things that are not meaningful, but things that are dangerous to you. Not to anyone else, to you. Anxious thoughts, sad thoughts, depressing thoughts, all of the negative things that we try to avoid. The most dangerous place in the world is the space in our heads. Our mind can be the most dangerous place to be. More dangerous than anything else. More dangerous than, whatever can be our minds. And the way that happens is when there's no water. When we fill our minds with Torah. When we are thinking about Torah. And not just when we're at a class or studying. But when we study enough that we're thinking about our studies, when we're walking down the street, driving in the car, or we listen to a Torah podcast, or watch a YouTube video where the rabbi's eyes are a little bit quick. I'm kidding, right? You connect with Torah in your head, that repels the snakes and scorpions. V'habar reik, the pit was empty. Ein bo mayim, there was no water, there's no Torah. Avol nachsh v'akrabim yesh bo, but there were snakes and scorpions in there. That's the progression. If the mind is empty and it has no water or Torah, then there will be necessarily, automatically, snakes and scorpions, because something will fill that void. Either it's going to be something positive of your choosing or something negative of not your choosing. That's the way it works. The mind does not remain empty. Never did it happen that you were walking down the street and not thinking about anything and nothing was filling your mind. It's not true. There's always something, there's always some sort of stimuli or stimula, whatever the right way to say that. There's some sort of stimulus, third option, in your mind. It's either going to be positive or it's going to be negative. And it's our choice. And the best way to ensure that it's going to be negative is by not being proactive about it being positive. If we're not consciously and proactively filling it with something positive, that in the vacuum, in the void, might just creep up those snakes and scorpions that spook us by day or by night, or by night. And it's a product of us not consciously and mindfully filling it with Torah ideas. So this is fire and this is water. Makes sense? Did you have a question?
No. Can you sum that up in one sentence, everything you just said for the last 10 minutes?
The last part?
About
fire and water?
No. About the snakes and scorpions.
Yeah.
And the water, and filling your mind with
yes.
positive versus negative.
Yeah.
The vacuum, the void. Can you sum it up?
Very quickly.
Quickly.
The Torah describes an empty pit and says there was no water. And Rashi says, yeah, there was no water, but there were snakes and scorpions. And the mystics say that the pit is the head, and the water is Torah, and the snakes and scorpions are negative thoughts, meaning distressing thoughts. The voices in our heads, distressing, of distress. Whether it's anxiety, sadness, whether it's shame or fear, whatever it is, it's the negative stuff in our heads. And so here's the point. When the pit is empty of water, Torah, then there will be snakes and scorpions. But if we fill it with water, then it repels the snakes and scorpions. Fill our minds with Torah, and it keeps away the negative stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't think of more than one thing at a time. So if you're thinking about, if you're grappling over a taisvus, I'm speaking in Talmudic terms here, if you're trying to break your head over what the Talmud means in a given situation, you know what you're not doing? You're not spinning yourself into a loop at that point in time. Yeah.
Okay, I missed something. I get all that, what you said.
Yeah.
But regarding water, at the beginning you were differentiating fire from water.
Mm-hmm.
Fire was going up, water was going down.
Yeah.
So how come now water
Good.
represents Torah?
We reclaimed water. We've been slamming water this whole time.
Right.
But just now, about in the last few minutes, we've been saying, but there's another element of water that actually represents something very positive and spiritual, and that is Torah. Okay. Just like water flows down, Torah was given from above to below. And it's not just that, well, God gave us the Torah, because that could be anything. God also gave us life. But it's that Torah is divine wisdom that shouldn't be able to be understood. Really, by definition, God's, the prophet says, one of the prophets, Ki lo machshavotai machshavotechem. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Meaning, we can't fathom God's mind. And so God's wisdom, i.e. Torah, should not be fathomable to human beings. The fact that we can understand it is a tremendous blessing from on high and a gift from above to below. Now, I want it for the last part of this. I want to talk about how this reflects itself in two modalities of divine service, and then the entire story arc will be complete. So there are three pillars upon which the world stands, according to Pirkei Avot. Torah. Acts of kindness, good. What's the third?
Charity.
No, it's acts of kindness. Torah.
Prayer.
Yes. Torah, I'm going to say in the Hebrew, and then Torah, okay. Avoda. Avoda means service. We'll talk about that in a second. Prayer. And Gemilot Chasadim, acts of kindness. So let's talk about these three. And we're going to actually not talk about acts of kindness right now, because that's not the duality that we're going to present today, and that's not in our text. That one is not in the immediate conversation. So two of the three pillars, one is Torah, i.e. Torah study, which is what we're doing right now. Woo, we got a pillow. And then the other one, the second one is Avoda. Avoda means service. What does that mean? Like working?
Prayer.
So back in the times of the temple, that would mean the sacrificial service, bringing sacrifices. Taking an animal and bringing it up the ramp onto the altar and then burning it up to God. We don't have a temple. And so today, that service is replaced by prayer, by tefillah, by prayer. I mean, we're in a building called Beth Tefillah, the house of prayer, so it's kind of appropriate to speak about prayer a little bit. What is prayer? Prayer is an act in which back in the day, you would take an animal and then kind of raise it up to God, right? Now, we don't have a temple. We're not taking an animal outside of ourselves. We're taking our inner animal and lifting it up. That's the purpose of prayer. To take your inner animal, your inner shepsela, your inner sheep, your inner goat, your inner whatever it is, and sometimes it could be a raging bull, right? But to take your inner animal, and everyone's got a different type of animal soul, to take your inner animal and raise it on the altar of your own heart and soul and, the flame, the fire of your divine soul to consume your animal soul and thereby lift it up and elevate it. And that's what prayer is. Prayer is the process by which a human being, every day, ideally, and certainly starting off the day with this in the morning, where a person raises their consciousness and gets themselves and allows themselves to be transported to a place where earthliness is not reality, but something else is truer than even the ground that we step on. To use a different symbolism that is really the same, but it's going to sound different until it obviously connects, right? The famous dream of Jacob upon leaving his, the Holy Land, right? He has a dream. And what does he see in the dream? A ladder. Sulam mutzav arza, v'rosho magia shamayma. There was a sulam, there was a ladder. And its feet were on the ground, and its top reached into the heavens. And the mystics say, what is the ladder? The ladder is the ladder of prayer. Because in prayer, we begin with our feet on the ground. And the goal is to get to heaven. I don't mean that literally. But I mean to raise our consciousness. We begin like the child at birth. We wake up and we start crying. I don't mean that literally. Hopefully not. Right? We begin our day saying, I'm hungry, I'm needy, I'm thirsty, I'm still tired, I'm groggy, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. We begin with that animal soul consciousness. The goal of prayer is to raise our consciousness to a place where God is a little bit more real and true, where we're a little bit more vulnerable than we thought we were, and God is a little bit more real and applicable than we thought he was. And it's about raising our consciousness. It's about rising up. It's about, tefillah is a battle. Tefillah is born of tension. Tefillah is about working against one's ego, against one's lower self to climb ever higher in the process. And we've had classes many times, or several times at least, where we've gone through the prayer book and the liturgy and mapped it out. Step one, these prayers, this is what we're talking about, and this is the experience, and this is the energy that we're supposed to be kind of working on internally, and then this is the next level. There's 4 rungs of prayer. 4 rungs to this ladder. And it culminates with the Amidah. And we're climbing ever higher. And so the experience of prayer is ascension. And therefore it's likened to which of the 2 elements that we've been speaking about today? Fire. And Torah study is an experience of enjoying the divine wisdom that is coming down to us, that has been gifted to us. You have a Torah text and you open up and you study it, and yes, you have to use your mind, and yes, sometimes you struggle with understanding it, and there might be some tension over there, but by and large, the process is receiving divine wisdom that came from above to below. And which of the 2 elements is Torah likened to, therefore? Water. Prayer is fire, and Torah is water. And every day we pray. And every day we study, and every day we have this combination of fire and water. And no, they don't put out each other, but they complement each other. Because the same God that oseh shalom b'mromav, that creates peace above, where fire and water coexist, where the sar shalesh, the minister of fire, the sar shamayim, and the minister of water, no, these are not wrestling names of a tag team duo called the Kabbalistic elements. All right. These are supernal angels that are represented by these names. The minister of fire, the minister of water, and they don't extinguish each other. So too in our own lives, the fire of prayer and the water of Torah study don't extinguish each other, but they complement each other. But they represent very different things. Fire is born of tension and struggle and dis-ease. Fire is very not at ease with itself. Doesn't want to be here. Water, super content. Easy, breezy, flowing, free. Below to above, above to below. Two different modalities. Within us, fire represents, as we just said, prayer, which is the striving to go higher and the striving to see things through a higher lens. I don't want to see myself as in control. I want to see God as in control. But to do that is a fight. It's a struggle internally. I have to kind of reshape my understanding, reorient myself in this world, reorient my mind, reorient my heart. And it takes time and it takes effort and we struggle with it. And that's why prayer is so distracting. You ever open up the prayer book and you start thinking about all sorts of other things? Happens to everyone. I've noticed that at Shabbat tables, the moment the Grace After Meals booklet is broken out, everyone starts yawning. You ever notice that? Automatic, involuntary, yawning. I was like, oh, shit, everyone's yawning. Involuntarily. It's amazing. Prayer is a struggle. You got to be working on yourself internally. Torah, higher perspective. Torah, you're being given. Okay. Prayer, you're fighting for new perspective. Torah, you're given a new set of glasses. That's the difference. Does that make sense? I like that. I'm going to stick with that. Prayer, you're fighting internally to transform your perspective. Torah, God says, here, try this on. It's like, I'm still sticking with this, by the way. Any optometrists here? Tefillah, prayer, is your squinting. You're trying to squint until you see something, deeper. Be a long process of squinting. And Torah is when the optometrist or ophthalmologist, I don't know the difference, where they say to you, hey, try these on. This will work. And you're like, oh my gosh, I see all the letters on the chart. It's amazing. So therefore, prayer represents the existential struggle of the human being. It represents, as we've been referring to this duality in our text, it represents the Jacob persona, the wrestler, the struggler, the fighter, the one who has to struggle with his twin brother and fight for every inch and fight against the darkness and, try to wrestle the darkness into light. That's the Jacob persona. That's the prayer persona. That's the fire persona. And then you have the other modality, Torah, which is a brand new vision, new set of glasses, where you have gifted from above this new perspective on reality. And you see things clearly. I can see clearly now. The rain is gone. No. In my way. I don't remember the lyrics, right? You can see everything clearly. And it's amazing. And there's no struggle. There's no tension. It's easy breezy. You're ready to go. You're ready to roll. That's water. That's Torah. And that's Yisrael. That's Jacob's second name. You got a new name. Not second name. It's his new name. The old name is you got to fight. The new name is there's no fight. And just to connect this, we're going to close it out. We'll read it inside. We're not going to do it today. We'll read it inside next week. Just to close this out. We've been talking about two different types of people because we all have the same mission in this world. I can see all obstacles in my way. Very good. Right. Oh, very good. Look at that. It's even apropos. I can see all obstacles in my way. Clearly. You know what the difference is? That's the perspective of Torah. Tefillah, Jacob perspective is, I don't know what the obstacles are until I bump into them. Until they take me down, and then I have to take it down. And so I'm wrestling with the obstacles. The other option is, the Yisrael, the Israel, the higher, the Torah perspective is, I can clearly see all the obstacles. Which means, I got this. I know what I need to do, and I'm going to do it. just to connect and connect all the dots. So today I think we connected all the dots, but I want to connect this now with last week and the week before as we close out. We've been talking, we all share the same purpose. And the purpose is to go into the world and extract sparks. There's pieces, there's shards, there's fragments of holiness, of godliness in everything around us. And our job, we are spark seekers, light collectors. No, we're not putting them in a little album and bringing to a little hobby fair. But we're not collecting light for ourselves. We're collecting it to raise it to the source, to reconnect it. The broken shards of light from the world of chaos, to reconnect it to its source. That's our job. But as we've said, there's two ways to go about the job. One is through struggle and fighting and conniving and deception, like how Jacob originally took the blessings from his father. And the other way is like a boss. You come in and you're not struggling, you're not fighting, there's no deception. You come in and you know what you're getting, and you get the light. And my friends, we each have these two paths in front of us, and we each walk along these paths. In all of our lives, as I've said the last few weeks, there are areas of struggle, of right and wrong that we struggle with. And when we make the right choice, it's a victory. It's like we are Jacob in that moment. We are the ones that are resting, and we end up on the winning end of that, but it's by maybe the smallest of margins, because it could have gone the other way. And we got the light. At the end of the day, we wrestled that light out of that situation because we made the right choice. So we achieved its purpose. That challenge, the purpose was fulfilled because we met that challenge. And we succeeded in that challenge, but again, by maybe the slimmest of margins, because it was a very difficult journey to succeed there. But then there are experiences where there's the challenges in front of us, but we have the Torah goggles. And it's clear and obvious what we need to do, and there's no challenge. And I want to end with this. Last week, we had some family visiting. There's something called Yeshiva Week. What is Yeshiva Week? So, most schools in the country will have winter break at the end of December. However, there are many Jewish schools that will not have a break then because, first of all, it's not necessarily like a Jewish time of year. It's not necessarily a Jewish celebration. It's not Jewish holidays. Second of all, everything's more expensive.
I have to leave a bit early.
No worries. Everything's a little bit more expensive. The travel's more expensive, the hotels, because it's like peak season. So you push it out a month or two or whatever it is, 4 to 6 weeks, and you have your Yeshiva Week. So everyone has off. The schools have off and whatever it is, and then everything's on the cheap. Because who's going vacationing, January 21st? That's not a thing. So Leah's sister, one of Leah's sisters in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, so they had off for the week or whatever. They came to Atlanta, spent time together. So it was a week ago. Was last week a holiday? Was Monday a public holiday? No.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Was it a holiday? It must have been Sunday. Whatever it was. I took the kids. The kids wanted to go to this place called Activate on Roswell Road. It's like a place that the kids run around. But they were full, so I took them to an escape room. They were older kids. I didn't have to go into the escape room, so they went to the escape room. And I want to conclude with this because I think, to me, it's a very powerful example of this duality of the Jacob-Israel, Yaakov-Yisrael duality. So what happens with an escape room? You might know escape room, you might don't know escape room. You go into this room, and it's got a theme, and there's puzzles or clues or whatever it is, and you have to get out of the room. They don't actually lock you in the room; they close the door, but you have to kind of find your way through clues out of the room. And you don't even know what you're looking for. Like, what's a clue? What's not a clue? Like, anything could be a clue, and it might just be a false lead. And so there's puzzles, there's numbers, there's frames. You take off the wall, might be something behind it. It's like you're in a room, and you just got to figure out the clues. And that's when you're in there as a participant. But then they have the room or game masters. Those are the people that work there. And they know where all the clues are. And when they walk into a room, they're not unsure of what the clue is and what the answer is and where to go and where to turn and how to get out, how to unlock the door, if it's locked even. But theoretically, they don't have a question about that because they're the room master. This is Jacob and this is Israel. That Jacob within us struggles. We go into the room and we don't know what we should do, and we kind of think we know, but we don't. There's false starts. There's we're grappling in the darkness, in our own darkness, and in the darkness of the world, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle to eke out a little victory, to eke out, and maybe you'll break out of the room, and maybe you won't. My kids and their cousins did not break out of the room in time. Don't worry, they're still here. They're fine. They're healthy. But they didn't get out of the room. But to the game master, you have clarity. You know where everything is. You know what the puzzles are. You know what the solutions are. You have clarity. There's no challenge. There's no struggle. Each of us has areas in life in which we struggle mightily, and hopefully we succeed and get out and get the light out. And areas in which we have clarity and we don't struggle. That's your Jacob. That's your Israel. That's your Yaakov. That's your Israel. May our challenges be a little easier. May we appreciate the clarity that we have and indeed bring light into the world. Thank you for joining me today for Kabbalah Café. Hope this made sense. Thank you very much for joining. See you next week. Next week it's President's Day weekend, I believe, but it's still a thing. Oh, I will take this opportunity to wish myself a happy birthday. No, my birthday's not today. Hold on, everybody. My birthday is tomorrow night. So I will be dedicating and sponsoring the Taste and Torah Club tomorrow. For those that sometimes come tomorrow. We'll celebrate. I'm throwing myself a birthday party with the cake. Birthday, again, is not till tomorrow night and Tuesday. It's the 23rd day of Shvat. But it's customary to give blessings on one's birthday. But I know that not always will I see the Sunday Kabbalah crowd, on Monday night or Tuesday. So I want to give everybody a bracha, a blessing.
Thank you.
That everyone should have clarity, and everyone should rededicate, should be excited about this mission of life to find the light and to seek the light and to connect the light and plug into the light. And we shouldn't get bogged down in the darkness because there's too much of that, and we don't need that, and that's not good for us or good for anyone. Let's focus on the light and take out the light, and may we rise from the Yaakov to the Yisrael with greater and greater clarity, with the perception, with the perspective of Torah.
Amen.
All right. Lots of blessings to everybody, and thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. All right. Have a wonderful week. Hey, Frank.
Happy birthday.
So Aquarius.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm actually, so my English birthday is February 20th.
Oh,
So I'm a Pisces.
Okay.
But I'm right there. I'm right there.
My mom's the 21st.
February?
Yeah.
Look at that. February is a great month.
It is.
All right. Dr. Maxie, Frank, great to see you. Ellen, great to see you. Alexa, Natan, and Yaakov. All right. I want to see, it's good to see you. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Shavua Tov, everyone.
Shavua
Take care. Have a
Tov.
good day.